Alright, this is the second part of the journal entry explanation video. Before that, let's read the disclaimer. Now, let's take a look at the debit amount formula. Here we see that the reserve amount is inside the indirect of the lookup debit amount column. We are going to use the journal's reference to match with the reference of different tables. I know it's very complicated, so I'll walk through each type of transactions like we did for the GR account number, so that we know in and out where the debit amount comes from. For an expense transaction, we have to fill in the net amount when the position is 1. Take a look at the debit amount formula. The amount can be found in the range specified in lookup debit amount column. So let's go to the lookup debit amount column. Here it says when the position column is 1 and the lookup table column is expense, then the lookup debit amount column will return what's inside the lookup table column and a string of net amount. Therefore, you'll see the column name expense net amount in the lookup debit amount column. So in the debit amount column, we use the indirect formula to point to the net amount column from the expense table. Let me show you the data flow graphically. Now let's go to expense position 2. Here we know that we have to debit tax recoverable for $12. Similar to position 1, the tax amount is traced from the debit amount column to the lookup debit amount column. The $12 are coming from the tax amount column of the expense table. That's determined by the lookup debit amount column. That's the reference one's tax amount that appears on journal's position 2. You may notice when we extract the debit amount and the debit amount column, we refer to the lookup debit amount column. With this concept in mind, we can speed up our lookup by focusing on the lookup debit amount column formula. For expense position 3, we have to look up from the first settle amount from the table specified under the lookup table column. When you look at the expense first settle column, you'll find the $112 for position 3. It's very similar for the income transaction. Here, the debit amount only appears on position 1 and 3. This is determined in the lookup debit amount column. For position 1, the lookup debit amount column returns the income table's invoice amount. When we look up to reference 5, we get the invoice amount 112, which is what you see at position 1. Similarly, The position tree amount is determined in the lookup debit amount formula. Here at the position tree, the lookup debit amount column will return the first settled column of the income table. If you look at the reference 5, you'll find the $10 under the first settled column. For fund transfer amount internal bank accounts, we only need to debit the deposit bank account at the position tree. The deposit amount is determined by the lookup debit amount formula. Here we see that the debit-free amount is from the bank's deposit amount column. In this case, the deposit amount is just the same as the withdrawn amount. We didn't enter the withdrawn amount, so the deposit amount is 0. The withdrawn account can be different from the deposit amount in case of fund transfer between banks with different currencies. This will be dealt with in our advanced version. Now the deposit amount will go to the debit-free position. For the payment transaction, we need to debit the accounts payable by the payment amount. When we trace the source to the lookup debit amount column, we will get the payment amount column from the payment table. This is coming from this part of the lookup debit amount formula. Go to reference 11 and look for the payment amount column. Then you'll find the $408 appears at the position tree. Now let's get to the receipt transaction. We are now working on the journal Ref 16. Here we only have one debit amount at the position tree. This is specified in the lookup debit amount formula. When the position is free and the lookup table column is receipt, then the debit-free amount will be in the receipt amount column from the receipt table. This is clearly shown at the columns. Now when we look at the receipt table, we see the $100 under the receipt amount column. That's the amount you see at the position tree.